William, hopefully your favorite videographer from Two Hats Publishing. I welcome you to another Two Hats special of community events. Let's look in and see what's really happening.
And welcome to Lambda Weekly. I'm Dave Taffet. I'm here in the studio with Lerone Landis. The late Patti Fink is running very, very late. She'll be back next week. And our guest is Robert Emery. Welcome back, Robert.
Lovely to be with you.
Robert was with us. Yes, it was in the Crack House, so that's 2 studios ago. And he was on the show in 1999 because he was appearing in an all-male version of Steel Magnolias that the author shut down. And specifically wrote the letter to Robert to cease and desist.
Really? It was charming. And actually, it wasn't the playwright himself. It was his New York lawyers.
Ah, I see.
So, interesting.
So, yeah, so Robert can never do an all-male version of Steel Magnolias again. The next scheduled performance of it is next year?
Yes.
Okay. But we're not going to have Robert on. We have him on every 19, 20 years. So he'll be back in June of 2037. We've just booked him. So watch for that online or whatever we have at the time. But welcome back, Robert. It's been too long. Robert is working on part of Late Night at the Dallas Museum of Art, which is going to be next Friday from 6 to midnight. And they have just all kinds of things. What are some of the things that are going on, Robert?
One of my favorite things is scattered throughout the evening, you can gather in front of one after another iconic pieces of art that is in the permanent collection of the DMA, and a staff person and curator from the DMA will tell you about that LGBT artist and their work.
Mm-hmm. And so that's just going to be scattered throughout the museum and throughout the evening.
Each of these conversations will be 15 minutes long.
You know, and knowing their docents and their curators, if you get to a painting that a curator's standing near, they'll just have a private conversation with you about it too. So that'll be fun. But the chorale is performing. Who else is performing?
We'll start out with the chorale and during the happy hour, and we have Verdigris Ensemble is going to sing us some songs about Leonard Bernstein from his letters and his music. We have Flexible Gray Theater is doing a fascinating combination of very young people who ask questions of very old people, and they have a dialogue, and that's going to happen at least twice in the evening and possibly 3 times in different locations. So you can be in the library, in the museum, and you're likely to see something happen which might seem spontaneous, but we have it very, very tightly programmed.
So these events will not be happening at the same time?
There's all kinds of things happening at the same time.
Okay.
Oh, there's going to be a screening of The Birdcage outside. There's going to be a screening of several screenings of Transpose, which is a new video about the trans community inside. There's going to be Chris Chisholm performing, and you're performing.
And we are performing. We've written a play about Dallas LGBT history. We begin when the soldiers return from World War II, and we take you to present day. That is in Horchow Auditorium at 7 o'clock.
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about Dallas history and get into a little bit of detail that maybe they won't get into specifically next week. But, Robert, you've been interested in Dallas history. You were one of the founders of the Dallas Way also.
In 2011.
So tell us what the Dallas Way is.
The Dallas Way has led the effort to tell the untold and undertold history of one of the most vibrant and productive communities in the city of Dallas. Mm-hmm. Individuals and organizations donate archival product to the Dallas Way, then we curate it, and then we send it to the University of North Texas, where it is permanently preserved, as well as painstakingly analyzed, described, and digitized into thousands of pages of archival product.
So what kinds of things have you donated? And I'll tell you about what I just donated to them.
Oh, golly. The collections of Louise Young and Vivian Armstrong, of Chet Flake and Bud Knight, Mike Englund, Dick Peoples collections, then the Black Tie Dinner collection, Resource Centers collection, huge.
Are you when you say the collection, are you the photos, writings?
Photos, writings, books, announcements, posters, podcasts.
Oh, okay.
Do you know one thing?
Yes.
I've donated some T-shirts, and I have a collection of more T-shirts I need to give up to them. In the movie The Dallas Way, the Dallas Buyers Club, when they were researching that movie, they went up to UNT and they were looking through specifically T-shirts, so that the T-shirts people were wearing were copies of these T-shirts that they had, and I'm looking, I was like, ooh, there's my T-shirt.
We talked to the costume designer. We also talked to the location scout, because he wanted to know, since they were filming it in New Orleans, he wanted to know what in New Orleans looks like Oak Lawn during the 80s. And we were able to give him the neighborhoods, and they used them.
Oh.
So the Dallas Way has been
Except
a part
Cedar
of a lot of
Springs
things.
had a center island down the middle in the movie, and it was, we're sitting
did.
there going, is that Cedar Springs? It's
And most importantly, they were looking for those iconic bungalows that
Right.
were always one block off of Cedar Springs.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. Anyway, so Robert has worked with Dallas LGBT history for a while now and has been collecting it and helping get other people to donate. I just found in my office a pile of copies, hard copies of old lawsuits like Lawrence v. Texas and Baker v. Wade and Hardwick v. Bowers, and these were all the iconic lawsuits. Some we lost, some we won. But these were the hard copies that were issued. You know, now you go to SCOTUS blog, and within 2 sentences, it's, oh, we won this one. Then you had to wait until the ruling was issued. Then you had to go down to the courthouse where the ruling was issued, or write to the courthouse or Washington, D.C. to get your copy, which is why Baker v. Wade was issued in August, and our celebration for it and our Pride Parade that celebrates the anniversary of it is in September. It took that long to get copies of it out there.
Yeah.
But I gave all those over to the, UNT so that they can get those online and get hard copies of them.
Are you looking for, if people want to donate other stuff, what are you looking for?
Oh, we like to tell people that now you've come out of the closet, go back in and pull out all of your historically significant items and give them to the Dallas Way. We want everything that you can think of. We can take everything from the saddle that was worn, the riderless saddle that was worn in some of the early Pride parades during the AIDS crisis.
On display right now at the Eric Johnson Library downtown on the 7th floor is Mary Franklin's TGRA Grand Marshal sash.
So all of that type of thing. 3-dimensional or flat paper.
Let's talk a little bit of history, because this is where it gets fun.
Yeah.
All the old stuff that you did differently. Back before there were gay bars in Dallas, where did gay men go to meet each other? You did some research on this. What did you find?
When the soldiers returned from World War II, let's remember there was no internet. There were not even personals in newspapers. Men would gather in Dallas's Theater Row. That's the neighborhood where the Majestic is now. But back in 1945, Elm Street there was lined with theater after theater. So we had our own theater district.
Yeah, I mean, the Majestic is so wonderful and so gorgeous.
It is.
There were like 10 of those.
10 of those. And one would buy a ticket to the theater, and spoiler alert, many gay men love theater.
I didn't know that.
Well, that's why we listen to the radio. We learn so much. And they would, at the closing of the theater, then they would walk from the theater to their car, and I imagine sometimes it took them up to an hour to get from the theater to their car because they would meet someone on the street. There was they had to create a code, a certain way of standing or addressing each other silently, so that you knew that you were approachable.
You showed us, but you can't show us on the radio, but see if you can describe the stance, because it's...
Yeah, Phil Johnson describes this stance. It was with your back leaning against the wall, one knee up so your foot's on the wall, and each of your thumbs perched inside your front pockets. That was code for, I'm approachable, you may come talk to me. And many men would hang out in Theater Row without a ticket to the theater, just for the opportunity to see who might be coming out of the theater that night, and they might...
Well, if you saw the show the night before, you didn't have to go in and see it again.
Absolutely.
Was there anything that went on during intermission during the show?
Not that I know of, David.
And these were not... I mean, as far as meeting up in the... there's a bar upstairs at the Majestic. I'm sure some of the other theaters had those kinds of things, too.
I don't have any
When I said,
information
did anything go on, I meant as far as ways that they met each other. God, does Robert have a filthy mind. I would never... You know me, Lerone. I would never say anything like...
Of course.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Because I bet during the show, or during an intermission for films that did have an intermission, these were mostly movie theaters. We're talking about them as, wonderful old theaters. They were movie theaters.
Yeah, some of them were in transition from vaudeville to theater.
Oh, that's true. Well, there would have been an intermission between the vaudeville and the...
several.
And the film.
And the movie, right.
Yeah.
To bring the organ up and play it.
Well, that's really interesting. Talk about a sign of the times, because you couldn't openly just go up and approach a man, because not only was it illegal, you could be thrown.
You could be thrown in jail in Texas for up to 15 years until 1962. You could go to prison for up to 15 years for being gay in Texas.
And that's why there were no gay people in Texas until
That's
they
why
went.
there were no.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was during World War II?
It was post-World War II.
Post-World War II.
We like to think of it as that old song that Judy Garland sang, How You Gonna Keep Them Down on the Farm, after they've seen Paris. They came back from World War II having seen the openness that homosexual men and women lived in Europe, and they were not... Our servicemen were not willing to return to their small towns with the small town attitudes. They flocked to big cities, and Dallas was a major draw.
One of my college professors, he was the chairman of our French department. He was gay and openly gay during World War II. During the 50s, he moved to Albany, New York as an openly gay person and was openly gay on campus, as far as I know, all the time. I went to kind of a liberal school. But during World War II, he was a code breaker. Which it seems as though... Do you remember during the Gulf War when they were throwing out all of these translators?
Yes.
And it turned out that all of the Arabic translators were gay? Well, it turned out all the code breakers during World War II and during the Korean War, they were all gay. It's as if certain parts of our brain are connected to the part of our brain that controls sexual orientation somehow.
And sees things differently.
And
that's one of the greatest gifts about being homosexual, is you see the world in a very special way, and you can see through things, and you can see things inverted, and you can see them upside down and backwards and in different color. You learn to see the world in code.
The way he described things, though, was his whole office was gay, or most of his office, if not everyone in his office, that they were very open about it, and the mood in the country was, we're all going to work together to defeat the Nazis and defeat Japan, and he said it just wasn't an issue. It didn't become an issue really until the McCarthy era.
Well, let's talk about what happened into all of those.
And I'm talking up in New York.
Well, okay, but let's talk about what happened to the fate of all those highly accomplished service people immediately upon their dismissal or their from the armed services. Many of their lives were ruined. With the famous case of Alan Turing, who broke the code, the Enigma code, and his life was utterly destroyed. That happened in varying degrees to the majority of United States soldiers upon leaving the intelligence corps.
And this was after McCarthy. It was during the Korean War, but George, that a lot of you have either heard on our show, from George and Jack, George Harris, he worked also doing code breaking. He was working for naval intelligence. His whole office, again, was gay. And upon dismissal, he was ready to be discharged. He and 27 others were arrested. They were held in Leavenworth for 6 months until they decided to drop their case. He could have been held in Leavenworth for years for the offense of having honorably served his country. It wasn't until much later on, like recently, was it under Obama, that his less than honorable discharge was upgraded to honorable. So
never forget.
Yeah. So when you say people's lives were affected, there were jobs that you couldn't get because what your military record was part of how you applied for a job.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
But that's a great, David, that's a great segue into Nolan Estes. If we're talking about serving people well and then being destroyed.
We have 1 minute till we have to take a break, but see if you can start this story.
It can happen. Nolan Estes was the superintendent of DISD in the 80s, and he declared that he would root out all the homosexuals, if there were any, teaching in DISD. He would find them, and he would fire them.
Wow.
And Harriet Earhart served on the school board, and she quietly and discreetly took Nolan to the side and said, Nolan, if you get rid of all the gays in the DISD, you will not have a school district to return to. On the night they were going to vote for this at the school board meeting, Nolan Estes did not attend, and that was the only meeting he did not attend in his entire tenure as superintendent. So the case was forgotten, dropped, and never talked about again.
Interesting.
And Harriet contends that he was spoken to by many more people than just her, and convinced to drop that because that would be disastrous.
One of the people who came out to Harriet to talk to her about it was Don Baker, who later filed Baker v. Wade, Bill Nelson, who was a teacher at the time at Hillcrest High.
One of our heroes.
When I interviewed one of the, what was his name? Mike Miles. His chief assistant said to me as I was waiting to go in, he said, do you know, Bill Nelson was one of my teachers and one of the people who has always inspired me. He said, everybody has that one teacher. He said, Bill Nelson was mine. You're listening to Lambda Weekly on 89.3 Knon FM. I'm Dave Taffet here in the studio with Lerone Landis. Our guest is the wonderful Rob Emery. We'll be back with more right after this.
This is Rollins Gilliland, and I'm listening to Lambda Weekly on 89.3, and darn glad to be doing it.
And this is Lambda Weekly. I'm Dave Taffet here with Lerone Landis. Our guest is Rob Emery. We're talking about a program that's going to be held this coming Friday at the Dallas Museum of Art from 6 p.m. till midnight. It is chock full of stuff. Rob's part of this is he, with some members of Uptown Players, have put on a play, or putting on a play. It's a 40-minute presentation, and it's about Dallas history. Also that night, though, are the Dallas Wings. What are they doing?
That night, I don't know much about what they're doing on the 15th, but I know what they're doing on the 14th.
What are they doing on the 14th?
On the 14th, they are supporting the Coalition for Aging, which is a wonderful organization we founded in 2015. And our goal is to make North Texas the best place to be gay and to be LGBT and over the age of 55. And
he was going to say gay and old. And he was looking at me at the time and decided, no, I better not say that. Today's show is a wonderful example of harassing our guests.
And our guest is going to be Dale Hansen, which everyone loves Dale Hansen.
Love Dale.
Love him. He's going to talk to us about aging in sports
he's old.
and gays in sports.
He's not gay, but a great ally.
The members of the Dallas Wings team are going to be our waiters and waitresses that night. And I'll be your celebrity auctioneer. We have some fantastic packages.
Where's this going to be?
It's going to be in Arlington. The tickets, though, most importantly, you can go to Coalition for Aging.
Is it at their Stadium College Park?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Okay. The way you get there is just take Center Street off of I-30, go south, and you will run into it.
Okay.
But don't drive into it.
Please.
Park in the parking garage, which is off Center Street to your right.
And there'll be directions at that point from your parking right to our beautiful dining room.
The next night is Pride Night. Now, I went to Pride Night last year and the year before. How many teams have Pride Night where they're flashing on their screen up above Pride flags and Happy Pride Night? And actually, 2 years ago, it really wasn't Pride Night. It was a commemoration of the Pulse shooting. All the teams had special jerseys printed up that night that said Orlando Proud. I mean, they were 100% with us.
Yeah.
Not that we're calling their team a bunch of lesbians, but I think I think some of their members might be. Just might be.
That might be.
One or two.
But Pride Night's a lot of fun. Probably half the audience, half of the people who are going to the game will be gay or lesbian, and it's just a lot of fun.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, Dallas Wings game. Have you ever been to a Wings game?
I have not.
You should go. They really are fun. Do you know one thing that makes it fun? I was watching with my cousins when I was down in Florida. I was watching the NBA playoffs, and they're big on fouls and, attacking each other and whatever. It's a friendlier game, the women's game, which is just actually more fun to watch.
Thank you.
So I enjoyed the Wings. I just love them to death. Anyway, the game's Friday. The fundraiser is Thursday. And on Friday also, though, is Late Night at the DMA.
Right.
Which, for people who are just tuning in, 6 hours of chorale soloists and small group singing and tours of LGBT artists in the collection and Leonard Bernstein performances. Who knew he was gay when he wrote West Side Story?
Right. He was
Who could
famously
imagine?
bisexual.
Yeah. But who knew?
Who knew?
Who could have guessed that he would have come out later in life? There'll be Kiki Ball, Rainbow Kiki Ball. What is that?
Oh, if you're familiar with the movie Paris is Burning,
Great documentary.
Great movie, and Ryan Murphy's latest iteration on Fox, which is called Pose. If you tune into that, then we're talking about that kind of ball. But what's going to make this one really fun is early in the evening, guests can attend a walking lesson. It's how we teach people how to walk on a runway.
How to pose.
It's where the word fierce came from. And then there's a second class on that later in the evening, but at 10:45 we're going to have all the finalists, both the teachers and the new devotee students. And that's going to be great fun.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Screenings of Birdcage outdoors, screenings of the film Transpose inside. Chris Chisholm is performing. One of the pieces is younger LGBT people can ask older LGBT people questions.
Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I wish there was much more of that. So that is a great thing.
It's something that Alice Way works on. This is Flexible Gray Theater who came up with this concept, and we need to do it a whole lot more because there's not a question that these young people ask that doesn't have a fascinating answer. Yeah, so that's going to be fun. And that happens twice in the evening. Some things we did twice.
And to give you an idea of the divide, Amber Roman, our new LGBT police liaison, was on.
Love her.
And so we're talking to her, and she's talking about how she was married, and we said, what kind of wedding did you have? And she said, just a traditional wedding. I love that. I love that younger gay people can think that their wedding is traditional. There is nothing traditional about it. It is wonderful that that their wedding is traditional. And when we said, what was traditional about it? She said, well, my mom threw us our bridal shower, and our whole family was there, and it was in a church or, you know, so it was a traditional wedding.
We both wore white.
The only
It was in June. Right.
It's the only way they could describe it.
Yeah.
Right.
And I love that.
I love that.
Love that.
I do love that. Okay, so your part of this is a performance. It's going to start at 6 o'clock.
7 o'clock.
It's going to start at 7 o'clock. And the performance is going to be history.
It is going to be Dallas LGBT history from World War II to present. And we started this with the City of Dallas Office of Cultural Affairs and the DMA. And they pulled together about 12 of us. Each month we have a meeting and the board table grows exponentially. So now there's this many programs and this many people. This is our inaugural year, and if you all will come out and support it, then we hope we can do it again and again.
And where did the idea come from? Is it possible there are gay people who work at the Museum of Art and in the Dallas City of Cultural
Is it
Affairs
possible
offices?
we don't all live in a vacuum and that we do all intersect? In 2014, Dallas Mayor Mike Rawlings said, "There's not a greater community in the city of Dallas than the LGBT community." In 2018, the LGBT community in Dallas is well integrated into the mainstream.
Sure.
But this is not always the case. Before marriage equality, before Don't Ask, Don't Tell, before Queer Eye for the Straight Guy and RuPaul's Drag Race, we were outlaws.
And you know, when you say we're integrated, okay, so this show in 1983 when we started was, whoa, what are these people doing?
Right.
Now we get calls from political candidates who have nothing to do with the LGBT community who are not in Dallas. We get calls or we get books sent to us that have nothing to do with it, wanting to be on our show.
Right.
All the time.
When Bill Nelson ran for city council, he lost. But 4 years later, mayoral candidate Annette Strauss actively courted the gay vote. She was the first person to do so, and she won.
Yep. How long did it take you all to condense that much history into 40 minutes?
Yeah, we're still working on it. And we're still working. We read through it many times, and we cut a sentence here and there to get it down to 40. At the end of the show, we do indicate on the screen, here's a short list of all the things that we didn't talk about, and it zooms past with 100 things that we simply don't have time to talk about in 40 minutes.
Right.
But what we do talk about is significant and beautiful and shows the progression from outlaws to icons.
Now, one of the things you said you're going to be talking about is language.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about language.
We talk about how in 1880, when it was referred to as the love that dare not speak its name, Oscar Wilde. And then in the 50s, some pioneers like Frank Kameny and Phil Johnson used the word homophile. In 1969, the word gay came into being and gay liberation. Then in the 80s, gay was expanded to gay and lesbian. Then in the 90s, we made an acronym, GLBT.
I remember that.
Then 5 years-ish later, that was inverted by the Associated Press to LGBT. Then in 2015, LGBTQ. We now have LGBTQ+, and currently the acronym is 24 consonants long.
Which I can't remember.
Yeah.
Which you can neither remember nor can you identify.
Right.
And nobody can.
And it's not that I don't want to embrace all of these different groups. I like LGBT+.
Because it occurs to me that every initial that follows LGBT plus or LGBT plus is already referred to in the original four.
Yeah, that's my argument. Like,
except
why
for the
is it
I.
necessary?
Well, because except for the I, which is intersex, which is a
someone with
it's a biological
yeah, it's a
thing.
biological. But even they may identify as one or the other, so they're still covered.
Hey,
Right.
if they're not covered, let's add them, but let's do get to a common denominator, and then
I like
and then-
LGBT+ because it gets to the point where people are more wondering, okay, lesbian, gay, bi, questioning or queer, intersex, ally.
And the challenge with all of
advocate.
that is that our non-gay allies are confused by that. They're as confused as we are. But the difference is we're confused and we have somewhat of a handle. They're trying to help us in our struggle, and they need us to be something they can put their arms around. And so let's define this and shorten it if we can.
Right. When we were talking before the show, I said, well, talking about language, our show is called Lambda Weekly, and if you were to ask somebody who is younger, it's like, what does that name even mean? Most people don't even think about it, but when you're thinking about what do names mean, before we had pride flags, the lambda, the Greek letter, was the symbol for gay pride.
You might say code.
It was code. Right, it was code. But it was the symbol. And I remember I had this one navy blue shirt with a big lambda on it, and I had that for years. I don't know what happened to it. I'm sure it fell apart because I wore it all the time. But it was that code that I was gay.
So Robert is right. For the show, we talked about this, and it is the 11th letter in the Greek alphabet.
The 11th letter in the Greek alphabet.
And it stands for male, or it's a male symbol, or
it's a wavelength.
It's a wavelength.
Yeah.
Well, it also used to be gay.
Yeah. That's good.
So yeah, I'm sure the meaning of it is.
But that's why Lambda Legal, which was formed about 30 years ago, also why they're Lambda Legal,
right?
And we're Lambda Weekly.
It's code. Remember pink triangles?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And there's an entire notion now where we've been so integrated into mainstream that we've lost our own private culture. That you used to wear that Lambda T-shirt, and you knew that if somebody recognized what that was, then you had a connection.
Oh, I could wear it out. It didn't matter. I could wear it on the streets. It was meaningless to most people. It was just a big white lambda on a navy blue shirt. It didn't mean anything.
But now you see either the rainbow flag or you see the human rights sticker, and just about everybody knows what those two things are. It's not a secret anymore.
Right.
It's not so much a secret.
Right. And our symbols have evolved into, that was just kind of a random symbol that I guess it meant men, and so it then came to mean gay rights, whereas the equal sign that the Human Rights Campaign uses was really very deliberate, because the propaganda from the far right wing was they want special rights, and we kept saying, we don't want anything special, we just want the same equal rights that you have. There was a lawsuit that was settled this week, 2 lawsuits. One was Masterpiece Cake. And that one was a loss, but it was a narrow loss, and it had to do more with, the way the Colorado Human Rights Commission spoke about religion to the cake baker, and they felt that it infringed on his religious rights. What that had to do with whether or not he should bake a cake for a gay couple, the same way he bakes that same cake in his storefront bakery that he has, public access on a road that everybody built, on sidewalks that everybody built, in a building that is protected by the same police and fire department that everybody pays for. Does he have the right to discriminate? And they found it was a 7-2 decision, that because of the way the Human Rights Commission came down on him. Later that week, there was a wonderful case out of Arizona. The way it was decided was based on Masterpiece Cake, and it said it was a stationery store that wanted to discriminate. They did not want to do any invitations for gay people. So in other words, we're a stationery store, gays not allowed. Right. And the decision said, based on Masterpiece, you cannot discriminate against an entire group of people. You can discriminate against a particular statement that you don't want to make. In other words, if there's something that you're saying in your printed stationery that goes against your religious belief, you can do that. So you think, that's giving them the out to not do invitations. But they said if the message is the same for the gay couple or the straight couple, you can't opt out. They said in Arizona, or this actually came under Phoenix law, under their ordinance, if the invitation is for Pat and Pat, it doesn't matter if Pat is Patrick or Patricia or any combination. The message is the same. You can't do it for one group and not the other, because then you're discriminating against the group, not against the message. The effect of the message is exactly the same. So, interesting case.
That's what was part of confusing with the Masterpiece ruling, because one of the examples they tried to use to justify the cake baker's right to discriminate against this gay couple was another case where someone tried to make a cake with a very ugly message on it, and the cake baker would not do it. So they said, well, that went to court also, and that cake baker won. But the thing is, she said she wouldn't do that cake for anybody.
Right.
So I don't know how that helped. I don't know how that helped them, but this is very similar to what's going on in the
and there was a
case.
survey done where of different bakers, would you do this message? And the answer was, I'd bake them the cake, they can have the cake, I would hand them the cake decorating equipment, and they can
Correct.
put whatever message on they want.
Correct.
I'm not going to write that, though. But again, it had to do with, I wouldn't do it for anybody.
She wouldn't do it for anybody.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Not that I wouldn't do it for a gay wedding. And, and the thing about the cake was, my wedding cake didn't have any message written on it. Did yours?
No.
So it's just a cake.
But I mean,
Why did he have the right not to bake a
Right,
cake for them?
right.
He's going to bake that cake anyway. Why did he have a right not to sell it to them?
Because it felt as if baking that cake made him a part of that wedding.
Yeah, well, and selling the gun makes you part of the murder.
Right.
So,
which they didn't really use that in their opinion.
they didn't.
They did not.
They decided we're not going to penalize, and I get this part, we're not going to penalize him because we don't like the way the Colorado Human Rights Commission treated him, but what about the way he treated the couple that's suing him?
Yeah.
I didn't get this decision, really.
I didn't get the decision either. I know we'll talk more about this when we have Ken Upton on
in July.
In July, but the thing that really struck me is that if this case had taken place or it born out of the state of Texas, I would have been like, okay, yeah, we're going to lose. We're not protected anywhere in the state of Texas laws on a state level as far as discrimination policies. Okay, but in Constitution, in Colorado, their Constitution absolutely includes us and explicitly says you can't do that. So even just based on their Constitution alone, I thought they would win.
And you're right, we'll talk about this with Ken, but it seemed to be they didn't like the way, they didn't just say, no, you can't do this. They were attacking his religious belief in some of their wording, and it was pretty bad. Because you can have whatever religious beliefs you want to have, and I firmly believe that. I don't care what your religious beliefs are, as long as it's not infringing on my rights. You can still have those beliefs, though. Anyway, you're listening to Lambda Weekly on 89.3 Knon FM. I'm Dave Taffet here in the studio with Lerone Landis. Our guest is the fabulous Robert Emery, who's just, I wish we had that on film.
I wish we had cameras.
This is one of those episodes that
Yes.
we need a camera, and it needs to be pointed at Robert.
Thank God there's no camera.
Who's our guest once every 20 years. He will be back in the year 2037. We'll be back with more right after this.
Hi, this is Valletta Lil, and I listen to Lambda Weekly. I hope that you will too.
And this is Lambda Weekly. I'm Dave Taffet. Our guest is Robert Emery. He is going to be part of Late Night at the Dallas Museum of Art this Friday night, which runs from 6 p.m. till midnight. It's going to be lots of different events. Robert's part of this is they're putting on a 40-minute play about Dallas LGBT history. Okay, so one of the things that you'll be talking about is the effect Anita Bryant had. Stonewall wasn't that important to Dallas. In fact, the reason it's Pride Month in June is because of Stonewall. We do our parade in September because of Baker v. Wade, which was the first lawsuit that threw out the sodomy law here in Texas. So we like doing things that are more personal. Who
is Anita Bryant?
Yeah, Anita Bryant is a singer, political activist, and a former Miss Oklahoma beauty pageant winner. In 1970,
runner-up to Miss America.
Runner-up to Miss America. And in 1970, she became known as an outspoken opponent to gay rights in the United States. And what's funny about that is, you think to yourself, now wait a minute. She was a singer. She was in show business. She came up through the beauty pageant circuit, and she doesn't love the gays.
I was about to say, she's been around gay men her whole life.
Right.
Well, did she win? No.
No.
That's it. She was upset.
She was the wholesome representative of the Florida orange growers, and she became famous along with their tagline, "Breakfast without orange juice is like a day without sunshine." And Jerry Falwell...
Which you can only say if you're gay.
Which you can only say you can. And you have to deliver it with a mellifluous tone like she did. So wholesome. Jerry Falwell joined her campaign, and it went downhill from there for us because they succeeded. Because they convinced people in their neighborhoods and in their communities that we were out to get them. We were actively pursuing their children. The name of her campaign was Save Our Children. She was famous for quotes such as, "If we give equal rights to homosexuals, then we will have to give equal rights to people who sleep with St. Bernards." And nail biters.
And she was successful. The first non-discrimination ordinance in the country was in Miami, and she led a campaign to get that ordinance repealed.
Right.
But you're saying she had an effect in a way that Stonewall didn't.
Oh, there's
Dallas.
There's very good news to this story.
Oh,
as horrible as she was and her campaign was for us, she was one of the greatest gifts Dallas ever received, in that Stonewall meant little, but Anita Bryant meant everything, and attendance at Dallas Gay Alliance meetings soared. Bars took screwdrivers off the menu and created an apple juice and vodka drink called the Anita Bryant, and every penny they raised on the Anita Bryant they gave to gay activists to fight her.
There was a big boycott of orange juice, actually, and
it hurt badly, and she lost.
And the Florida Orange Juice Commission fired her. Finally, it took 2 years. I think it was like this campaign was more like 1975. She really came to prominence. By 1977, I believe she was fired. Finally,
it was over.
So when did the cake in the face happen?
Ah, very good. That cake in the face happened at an interview, much like what we're doing now. In 1976.
I think so.
But this campaign...
Where did it happen? Do you remember? I don't remember either.
But this entire campaign significantly damaged her career. She had lots of records and television appearances before this, but it's just not good to go after people, regardless of who they are. It's not a long-range winning.
If you're representing, you're the face of orange juice, or you're the face of any product, you don't want your name associated with, I side with this group over here on this side.
You maybe not today, but in 1970, it seemed like a perfect combination of Miss Wholesome, Oklahoma, Florida orange grower representative fighting the horrible plague of homosexuals.
And this was probably the first boycott of any product by the LGBT community. And I'm calling it the LGBT community. It was mostly the gay community, but there were lesbians, there were transgender people.
Sure.
And we weren't organized that way, though. But this was the first boycott of a product, and it worked.
It worked.
Sales were down, and they noticed it, because what we were starting to learn was, oh, okay, so this isn't just me boycotting orange juice. This is my mother, my father, my brother, my sister, my cousins, my friends. And that's more than just one gay person who's not buying orange juice. That's at least 10 people now who are not buying orange juice. And they were telling their friends, they have a really horrible representative. She sings about how wholesome orange juice is, and then she goes out and talks about how horrible other people are. I'm not buying their product.
And one of those horrible people she's describing is my son I love, or my nephew that I love.
Right.
That was the turning point.
So what happened to her?
Yeah. Look her up.
Well, her husband left her. He came out.
Get out of here.
Which is where a lot of her hatred came from. That's where, What was his name? Something Green. Bob Green?
Bob Green?
I think so, yeah. But yeah, she just went away. She never had much of a career after that, other than singing in right-wing churches.
Right.
That was, which was a great career. She made lots of money. Not compared to what she did before. She made lots of money.
Right. All right, Bob Green.
Yeah. So.
So she was a great gift, because sometimes those people who poke a sleeping bear turn out to be a great gift. And Dallas Black Tie Dinner was formed at that same time, and it's grown to be the largest LGBT fundraising event in the world. Dallas has a lot of things that are the greatest in America, which makes them the greatest in the world. For instance, we have cultivated and maintained the largest LGBT church in America, Cathedral of Hope. We have the largest and most recorded gay men's chorus in the world, the Turtle Creek Chorale. We have the largest and most successful gay theater in the world, Uptown Players. And you may think, well, no, wait a minute, hold on, draw the line for me on gay theater. Is that not redundant? But you may recall it was a decade ago when even the Tony Awards are quite closeted.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there.
Yeah, my ex, I believe, was the first person to win a Tony Award and to thank his husband.
Right. It was scandalous, and that was about 2008.
Yeah, it was when my friend Hal won his award for as producer of Thoroughly Modern Millie.
Okay. A remake, yes.
And it wasn't just thank his. It was that when they announced his name, he got up and kissed the person he was with.
Yes.
That's what it was. It wasn't. He wasn't married yet at the time.
And today, that happens every award at the Tonys. But in 2008
That was the first.
and before, even the Tonys were closeted. So,
If they did that, the camera would not have been on them.
right.
So they had to be very careful.
Lots of fast camera action going on.
So let's. We have about 10 more minutes. Harvey Milk. What's his connection to Dallas?
Yeah, a lot of people connect Harvey Milk with San Francisco, and they should.
Feh.
And
San
they,
Francisco. Feh.
yeah. And the second longest time he spent anywhere was New York, where he was born and grew up. But the third longest city he ever lived in was Dallas.
Yeah, he lived in, and he was here twice.
He lived here 2 different times.
And he hated it here.
It was not as progressive as he required. And thank goodness, in almost around his 50th birthday, he uprooted his life utterly and reinvented himself in San Francisco to all of our benefit.
Yeah.
Do you know, after he was elected, he came back here once to speak to the Dallas Gay Political Caucus, I believe it was, or and
Dallas Gay Conference.
Dallas Gay Conference, right? And I think that was 1978. It was soon before he was killed.
5 months before he was assassinated.
And he looked at Dallas and looked at this organized community and was really impressed with what he saw, and said at that time that this is not the Dallas I lived in.
Right. Yeah, if he'd have stayed, he would have been with William Wayburn, Mike Anglin,
And elected here.
and elected here.
Yeah. It's very sad. He's also, and here's my school's claim to fame, he's our most famous alum.
All right.
And we have different things on campus that are named for him.
Good.
Stuart Milk goes up to Albany very often and speaks at Harvey Milk Day events. Yeah, it's interesting that our school is very proud of him. His picture has been on our alumni magazine a number of times, and it's not like, oh yeah, he's our most famous alum, like Baylor would have done. I wish Patti was here, but has taken his celebrity and what he's done, and the school is very proud of it.
They have every reason to be proud of
Sure.
him. And I look forward to a day when none of the three of us have to imagine that that's anything other than exactly right and
What it
proper.
should be, right?
Yeah.
Right.
He is a national treasure, and not just to us. He opened up the world to a lot of people. And he did it with love
Yeah.
and hope.
Howie Dare.
Precious Howie Dare. With his degree in psychology, he opened up the Oaklawn Counseling Center. And he did it for the purpose of helping people who needed to talk but didn't want their homosexuality defined as their problem. He wanted it to be merely a facet of their personality. But at that time, in 1970, so many people would seek psychiatric help, and that was the definition of their problem. So he was...
Because part of the, what is it, the American Association...
American Psychological Association.
Homosexuality was listed as one of a mental illness.
Well,
it didn't come off until 1990 something.
And you know where? No, not 1990. This was back in the 70s that it came off.
When
of
it
their
came off,
listing.
okay.
Yeah. But do you know where the American Psychological Association was meeting? Do you know where?
No.
Here in Dallas.
Here in Dallas.
Okay.
And one of the things they convinced people was at a dance, Frank Kameny and Phil Johnson got up and danced.
Really?
And I think it was at the Hilton Hotel downtown, which is the Statler.
That photograph is in our show.
Oh, is it?
Awesome.
Yeah. But, you know, it's serendipity that it happened in Dallas, but that did happen here in Dallas. And Howie Dare had a partner in his counseling, and that was
Candy Markham.
who's on our show 4 times a year.
Clinical
She opens
psychologist.
Pledge Drive every quarter for us.
They went to a conference in Houston together. Long before the word AIDS was ever created. They went to this health crisis meeting in Houston. They drove down together, and on their way back, Howie said to Candy, "We're going to need to get organized." And Candy said, "Well, but Howie, we don't even know what this GRID is, this gay-related immune deficiency is." And Howie prophetically answered her, "We don't know now, but we will, and we're going to have to be ready."
And that was at a time where other leaders in the gay community here, like Bill Nelson and Terry Thibodeau and William Wayburn, were saying, well, they have it down in Houston, but we're not going to get it up here.
Right.
Wow.
Well, and Houston said that about New York.
And Houston said that about New
And
York.
New York and San Francisco had it only.
And we don't have to worry about it here because people don't travel.
Right.
We don't have airplanes here. So, but yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So I think at the time, really, though, what people were really feeling was, you know, another disease came along at that time called Legionnaire's disease, and it took several weeks. There were a number of people that died of it, and it took a few weeks till they figured out what it was, and they cured it. And they couldn't imagine that this thing was going to be something. It wasn't that it wasn't going to come here, but certainly we're going to have a cure for it in, 6 months.
Sure.
And we didn't.
And
Still don't.
the problem, the challenge with AIDS is it had the extra stigma of being gay.
Okay.
Right. In
So
this country.
So it was silenced. Reagan's press secretary laughed about it openly for years. You can see those videos on YouTube, and they'll rock your world. They'll make your blood run cold the way that their press association laughed it off. One more really fun story about Dallas was, well, again, it doesn't start out good. It's to remind us that the Dallas police targeted all of the Oak Lawn and Cedar Springs discotheques for raids. Until 1979, when they raided the Village Station. And they arrested people on the site for public lewdness. And the definition of public lewdness was 2 men disco dancing together.
Stop.
Yeah, you didn't have to be touching.
You didn't have to be touching. You had to be facing each
Or
other.
showing anything.
No. You just
Or
had to
pulling
be...
anything out. Just
Except your style and your wicked dance moves.
And thanks
And
to
that was punishable by a jail term. But here's the great news. So in 1979, even though the Dallas police were still using the old intimidation tactics from the 50s, the Dallas gay community had matured and evolved and organized and shared with each other. So for the first time, they didn't do what they'd always done, which is stand in front of a judge and confess and pay your fine and go back into the closet and try to contain the damages as much as possible. This time, they all said, not guilty, we want a trial. And all the charges were dropped.
And do you know who the attorney was? Don Mason, who's now the head of AIDS Services Dallas.
wow.
Right, he's been on our show many
The
times.
hero.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but he was one of the ones who encouraged them. He was the attorney that the gay community went to, and he enlisted an attorney who had better experience in this type of case, and that was Jim Barber, who was not gay, but again, an icon in our community for getting those charges all thrown out. because until then, people were panicking and committing suicide and moving away from Dallas and doing all kinds of terrible
Because
things.
your name was put in the newspaper, and you lost your job, and you lost your family, and you lost everything.
Right,
Oh, wow.
including a medical doctor. And I can't remember his name, but I mean, you're in your own practice. He was going to lose all of his patients as a result. Robert Emery, thank you for coming on, and
Thank
maybe
you
we
so
can
much.
schedule something for you in 10 years, not 20.
Well, I'll check my book.
Okay. I'm a very busy person. Next week, our guest is... I forgot, and so did
too.
Lerone. And but we'll be back. Have a good week, and we'll see you then.
Thank you, David.
This is William, hopefully your favorite videographer from Two Hats Publishing. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like it, please leave comments below, or like, follow, or subscribe to us and get notices of all our videos. We love it, even when you call.